Hello and welcome to When They Popped. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Mary.
Christmas is literally next week. What's happening? Are you done with all your shopping?
I started doing a little shopping yesterday, so no? Are you? I don't know.
I was like going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday with all of my lists already, but I always panic at the last minute and I'm like, does everyone have enough in their stockings? Like, oh my God, I need to do blah, blah, blah. So I try not to be like an over consumer, but it gets me every year. But at our house, I mean, what the real reason for the season is, I feel like, is for Christmas movies. And we start watching those on Thanksgiving Day. So we've been like so deep into it. So we thought it would be fun today to talk about some of our favorite holiday movies from the 90s and early 2000s. But before we even get into that, we haven't discussed the new Jonas Brothers Christmas movie yet. A very Jonas Christmas movie, which dropped back in November on Disney Plus and Hulu.
I know. We need to talk about this for a second because it's pure nostalgic chaos. My sister-in-law and I actually watched it, I think the day it came out when we were in Disney. So it doesn't get more perfect than that. But in case you haven't watched it, this film follows the Joe Bros as they finish their European tour in London, and they're just like desperately trying to get home to their families for Christmas. But of course, there's a catch. Santa Claus himself, aka Jesse Tyler Ferguson, has cursed them because he doesn't want the band to break up. There's some drama between the boys. Santa's here to help. So every time they try to get home, the plane explodes, their train detours to Amsterdam. There's all these missed connections. Something goes wrong until they work out their issues as brothers. A tale as old as time, right? It's basically Planes, Trains, and Automobiles meets Jonas Brothers, Camp Rock, maybe. I don't know. Honestly, it works. And the movie features an absolutely stacked cast of celebrity cameos. As I mentioned, Jesse Tyler Ferguson as Santa, KJ Apa, Billy Lord, Laverne Cox, Randall Park, and Chloe Bennett. Plus, the brothers' real families make appearances. We see Priyanka Chopra Jonas, Danielle Jonas, and their mom, Denise Jonas. There are also 7 original songs, including Coming Home This Christmas, featuring Kenny G. And this is my favorite part. The whole thing clocks in at a breezy 80 minutes. I'm not sitting watching.
Ideal.
Yeah, like 2.5 hours.
Ideal.
It's like, oh my God, this is perfect. So what I loved about this movie is that it's like just so self-aware and on serious, almost camp, if you will. Like the boys play heightened versions of themselves. Like Kevin, he wants to try something different and have a solo. Joe is reconnecting with someone from his past and is basically like mocked as an unserious person that will never find love. Meanwhile, Nick is framed as like this type A tight ass that makes any and all decisions on behalf of the group. It also features that signature Jonas Brothers banter that feels both nostalgic and fresh now that they're adults and girl dads themselves. My favorite parts tended to be when they would just burst into a choreographed song. Like, this is a quasi-musical. Or what about that whole concept of a musical version of Home Alone? I was just cackling. What about you, Kelsey?
I loved how it was so tongue-in-cheek, so camp. I loved Joe's song when he wants to go out with them the last night of their tour and celebrate. It was so charming, so lighthearted. It could be family friendly, but then there's a couple chuckles in there for the adults. It was just so adorable. And I love that they had their real family members in there too. Like you mentioned, we got Kevin's daughters are in there too. They show a little bit of Nick and Priyanka's daughter, but they're very mindful on social media and in this movie to never show her face. You kind of get like a side profile, but it was just so cute.
I completely agree. But let me say, watching this, I feel like got us thinking about Christmas movies that actually shaped the genre for our generations. The ones that set the cultural template we're still following today. So on that note, we're going back to 2003 for Elf, 2006 for The Holiday, and A Muppet Christmas Carol, which is from 1990, before we were born. These 3 films defined what holiday movies could be in the 90s and 2000s, and honestly, they're still dominating streaming every December. So I wanted to start with Elf. This came out in November 2003, and it really transformed Will Ferrell from an SNL comedian into a movie star, and it launched Jon Favreau's directing career into the stratosphere. And it gave us one of the only Christmas movies from this millennium, in my opinion, that truly achieved classic status. But of course, here's the twist. Here's the wild part. This movie almost didn't happen. The script sat in development purgatory for 10 years. It was also originally written for Jim Carrey, and believe it or not, the original version was way darker, if you can imagine that. So let's dive into the chaotic, syrup-soaked journey of how Elf went from a rejected 1993 screenplay to a $220 million box office smash that we still watch every single December. So Elf was written by David Birnbaum way back in 93, as I said, a full decade before it hit theaters. When Dave moved to LA to pursue screenwriting, he was determined to write a Christmas movie. However, LA wasn't exactly brimming with Christmas spirit, so he started watching Christmas movies to just get in the zone. It's like when musicians have to record Christmas tracks in June.
And they decorate the booth and stuff.
You have to really make an effort to put yourself in that headspace, because typically it doesn't happen right around Christmas time. So he is watching old Christmas movies, and one film in particular sparked his imagination. That really old version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
That's my favorite Christmas movie.
Yes, a true classic. And Dave thought, what if instead of being a reindeer with a red nose as a misfit, his main character was a 6'3" guy who was adopted, didn't know it, living in the North Pole, and he was a misfit. So he kind of took inspiration from Rudolph and ran with it to create Elf. As time went on, Jim Carrey was the front runner to play Buddy the Elf. And this was peak Jim Carrey era. He was fresh off The Mask and Ace Ventura. But as the project continued to languish in development hell through the late 90s, this collaboration with Jim Carrey and Elf just never materialized. And I honestly think that's for the best, because it just would have, I think, been overkill to have Jim Carrey in this and the Grinch. I would have just been so sick of him at the holidays, oversaturation of Jim Carrey at the holidays. So it worked out. So the script's getting shopped around, options are coming together and falling apart, directors came and went, and then Dave met manager John Berg, who had a brilliant idea. Hey, let's get Will Ferrell attached. He was fresh off of SNL and had hits like Old School, which also came out in 2003, that were getting some buzz and on the horizon. Will read the script and loved it, and it was his people who then thought of Jon Favreau to direct. However, when Jon Favreau got hands on a script, he turned it down originally. Why, you ask? Well, as we mentioned, the original version was much darker and more of a PG-13 film. Buddy was a grittier, more cynical character. That just didn't interest John at all. And honestly, I get that. I can't imagine Elf as a gritty, dark movie. But they didn't want to give up on Jon Favreau, though, so they asked him to take another look at the script and maybe rewrite it into a way that he would want to work on it. So for a year, John reworked that screenplay, turning it into a PG family film. He made Buddy more innocent, more childlike, more pure. And honestly, just that element of Buddy, the ethos of Buddy, is my favorite part of the film, just how happy and
he is Christmas.
Yes, and I just love it so much. So the turning point for John was when he realized he could make Buddy's world an homage to the Rankin Bass Christmas special. So just like our screenwriter, John Barenbaum, he was inspired by the Rankin Bass Rudolph. Favreau also felt inspired by that movie as well. So almost taking that inspiration a step further, that decision shaped everything. The costume design, the workshop sets, even the stop motion animals you see in the North Pole scenes. Even the elves' costumes were directly inspired by those in the Rankin Bass version of Rudolph, which is from 1964, by the way, and we're still watching that today. True classic status. But at the same time, while this may have saved the direction of the movie, it also nearly killed the movie, because Dave and John loved Rudolph so much and drew so much inspiration from it that New Line Cinema, the company behind Elf, got a little nervous. They'd worried that they'd stolen too much from the 1964 classic. Even lawyers were sent to the set to investigate. Thankfully, through some minor adjustments and legal eagling, they were cleared of copyright concerns, but it was dicey there for a hot second. Filming began in December 2002 and wrapped in March 2003. The budget going into this was a modest $33 million.
Modest.
Well, let's talk about some of the fun facts behind Elf before we get into the data. One of the most iconic elements of Elf, I'd say, is how giant Buddy looks compared to the other elves. Will Ferrell is 6'3", and Bob Newhart, Papa Elf, is 5'7". That is a height difference for sure, but not like a massive height difference. So how did they do that? They used forced perspective, the same technique that they use in Lord of the Rings. They go and build two sets, one large scale for the actors playing elves and one on a smaller scale for Will Ferrell. And then they carefully overlaid these elements using lighting to blend the seams. This meant that when Will and Bob had conversations, like you had to think about, like they couldn't make eye contact. And Bob would also be shot several feet behind Will to exaggerate the height difference. And I always notice when they do this, I didn't really notice it in Elf, but I always pick up on it when it's like a rom-com and we know that the actor is like really short and the leading lady is way tall. And I'm like, oh, they're shooting him from behind so he looks taller than her.
I've never noticed. I thought they just stood on an apple crate.
Well, there's probably some scenes where they can. I've heard Tom Cruise wears like lifts. Like I'm sure there are things when they can do that, but like if Buddy is sitting on his lap, like they can't, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so another fun fact, when they filmed the scenes in the Lincoln Tunnel and on the 59th Street Bridge, both of these were open to the public. And Jon Favreau told Rolling Stone, quote, whenever he, Buddy, Will Ferrell, was out there in his suit, we'd hear screeches and fender benders and lights smashing. People would be looking at him walking on the sidewalk, and that would cause a few minor traffic accidents.
Oh my gosh.
So those surprise reactions from pedestrians that we see in the movie, a lot of them, they are 100% genuine. Like people obviously were genuinely shocked to see a grown man in yellow tights and an elf costume running around Manhattan. And you also might notice that the department store in Elf is called Gimbel's, which is actually a now defunct rival to Macy's. But you may ask, why not use Macy's for the film? Well, they actually were in talks, but Macy's had one condition. They wanted the scene removed where Buddy calls out the Santa Claus in the department store as fake. They're like, because we want our Santa and our store to be real. We don't want there to be any misconceptions that the Santa in Macy's is fake. It's crazy. And Jon Favreau refused. He thought the scene was crucial. So they went with Gimbel's instead. But honestly, what a miss for Macy's.
I get what they're saying from like a brand safety perspective, and like little kids would be watching this movie. I get it. But there's so many ways that you could have gotten around that by just being like, our Santa's real. That was just for the movie. That's wild. And that is like the best. Isn't "you sit on a throne of lies"? Isn't that quote from Elf?
Yes.
You sit on a throne of lies. Like there's so many iconic lines that came from the Santa. Like that's so core.
I completely agree. I think they missed out on that. But how about this one? This was crazy. Buddy's all sugar diet was not just for show. Will Ferrell actually consumed all that maple syrup-soaked spaghetti, candy, and sweets during filming. Will told The Sun, quote, I ingested a lot of sugar in this movie and I didn't get a lot of sleep. I constantly stayed up. But anything for the movie, I'm there. If it takes eating a lot of maple syrup, then I will, end quote. That spaghetti scene with candy actually had to be shot twice because Will vomited the first time. And honestly, based on what we're learning, that's understandable.
Ugh. I do remember being curious when the movie came out, like, would that taste good? And it's funny because even a couple years ago, HelloFresh, the meal planning kit company, actually released an elf-themed meal kit a few years ago that included spaghetti, chocolate, marshmallows, and maple syrup. So maybe people are still recreating it all these years later.
Okay, this one is another fun behind-the-scenes story. James Caan, yes, the star from The Godfather, rest in peace, he was cast as Walter Hobbs, Buddy's grumpy biological father. And I have to say, fun fact, I almost named my pug Otis after James Caan's character in The Godfather, Santino, aka Sonny for short. And so James Caan is a favorite actor of mine, and it just was so special for me to see him in this movie. He was hired specifically because Jon Favreau wanted a stern, serious persona to play against, Will's goofy Buddy. And James took the role very seriously. He knew Walter had to be annoyed, never amused by Buddy, but Apparently, it wasn't all an act because James genuinely didn't get Will's humor and performance all the time. Will Ferrell revealed on Christina Applegate's podcast in 2024 when speaking about James Caan, quote, "I literally drove him crazy in that movie. In between setups, he'd be like, 'I don't get you. You're not funny.' And I'm like, 'I know. I'm not Robin Williams,' end quote." But Will later said to James Corden that James Caan eventually told him, quote, "Hey, I've got to tell you something. Every day on set, I thought you were too over the top. But now I see what you're doing. Great job," end quote. So he got it by the end, but I think the beginning maybe was a little rough. But even during filming, there's one moment when you can see James break character. It's like he finally is getting the humor behind Will Ferrell and this character. It's in the blood test scene where Buddy bellows when he's pricked by a needle. And James breaks. I mean, he's a seasoned actor. I don't think that's something that happens too often. But he cracks, and you'll see him turn away from the camera so as not to ruin the take.
I just can't imagine telling someone I don't get you, you're not funny. That is so brutal.
No, I know. It may have just been who he was as a person, who knows?
That's crazy. I think I would never return to set. I mean, good thing Will Ferrell was so confident in what he was doing that he was like, "I'm not taking notes from you, buddy."
Yeah, I feel like he's not someone that's easily embarrassed either, or just easily
Oh, no.
discouraged.
Please.
But ultimately the dynamic worked out. But on that note, there are several of these movies' most memorable moments that were pure Will Ferrell improv. For example, Buddy bursting into song in the middle of Santaland at Gimbel's. Just total Will Ferrell improvisation. Buddy screaming Santa when the manager announces that Santa is coming. I mean, that is probably the most quoted line from this movie. "Santa, I know him." Wow. And also the Jack in the Box scene where Buddy's terrified. That was Will Ferrell's genuine reaction to Jon Favreau remotely controlling the toy from off screen to scare him. Speaking of Jon, he made multiple little cameo appearances in his own film, very Alfred Hitchcock of him. He plays Buddy's doctor who performs that DNA test, the one where James Caan breaks character, that scene. He also voices the narwhal who says, "Bye, Buddy. Hope you find your dad."
That is the most iconic line. I say that all the time when people leave. I'm like, "Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad." And they're like, "What?"
They don't get it, but they should. Also, one of the Empire State Building security guards who escorts Buddy out is played by Will Ferrell's actual brother, Patrick Ferrell. And Peter Billingsley, yes, Ralphie from A Christmas Story, was a producer on Elf and had an uncredited cameo as head elf Ming Ming. A nice little Christmas movie Easter egg that they brought him in for that. So then let's talk numbers, people. Elf premiered on November 7th, 2003. Interesting that it came out early November. I think some people thought it would maybe come out in December instead, but I see what they were doing because, as Kelsey said, we all start watching Christmas movies way before Christmas.
And you know what's interesting? I saw that Love Actually came out the day before on November 6th, 2003. So they had some stiff Christmas movie competition.
Seriously. And, for opening weekend, Elf performed solidly, but it was not an instant smash. At the time, neither Jon Favreau or Will Ferrell were considered sure bets. Imagine that now. But actually, Jon had only directed small indie films and made-for-TV movies at the time. Will was still establishing himself post-SNL. Old School had come out earlier that year, but he hadn't yet proven he could carry a family film. But the final numbers told a different story. Worldwide, the movie grossed $228 million on that mere $33 million budget. That's, spectacular. It's more than 7 times the production cost. It finished 2003 as the 7th highest grossing domestic film of the year. It earned an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. So loved by fans and critics alike. Now, some critics noted that the climax of the film, when there's Santa's sleigh in Central Park, it felt a little too literal, a little too much. The movie maybe was at its best up to that point. But overall, it was embraced by critics and fans alike as something special.
I feel like it's Christmas. You have to have some kitsch. I don't accept that critique.
I agree. So critics are wrong once again. But here's what's wild. When we talk about Christmas movie classics, we're usually talking about films from decades ago. It's a Wonderful Life is from 46. A Christmas Story is from 83. Scrooge is 88, Home Alone is 1990. Even Home Alone feels very old and dated now compared to, modern releases. It's really tough to achieve holiday classic status with a new film, but I truly believe Elf did just that. Like, in just 20 years, it became a definitive modern Christmas classic. Jon Favreau told Rolling Stone, quote, "Our goal even then was to make a movie that could be part of that pantheon. The fact that it's in rotation is the highest honor that a movie can have," end quote. And not only that, Elf was the movie that really skyrocketed the career of those involved. For Jon, Elf proved that he could direct a major studio film with heart and humor. That led directly to him being hired for Iron Man 2, The Jungle Book, Lion King, and The Mandalorian. All of that started because of Elf. For Will Ferrell, Elf showed that he could carry a family film, and he wasn't just an R-rated comedy guy. It led to Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Step Brothers. Given Elf's success, you would think a sequel was inevitable, right? Well, kind of, but think again, because Will Ferrell firmly shut that down. It was in talks, though. Will was offered $29 million to reprise his role as Buddy for Elf 2. I mean, that's almost as much money as the entire original budget of the first film. But in a 2013 interview with The Guardian, Will explained, quote, "I would have had to promote the movie from an honest place, which would have been like, oh no, it's not good. I just couldn't turn down the money. And I thought, can I actually say those words? I don't think I can. So I guess I can't do the movie," end quote. So how I took that is it feels like Will knows they captured lightning in a bottle with the first movie, and he's not interested in tarnishing that legacy for a paycheck. And I absolutely can respect that. Honestly, Elf is proof that sometimes the best things come from the longest journeys. It all came together at exactly the right moment with exactly the right people. 22 years later, Elf isn't just a Christmas movie. It's a cultural phenom. It's a movie that plays in every mall, every TV channel, every streaming service from November through December. It's the movies all families watch together on Christmas Eve. As Jon Favreau said, being in rotation during the holidays is, quote, "the highest honor that a movie can achieve," end quote. And Elf, I feel like it earned that honor forever. Indefinitely. It's a staple. The end.
The end, period. Well, there's another staple that I want to talk about too, and that's The Holiday. And you had never seen The Holiday, right, Mary? This was newer to you?
I kind of wasn't a huge rom-com girly, so I felt like that was this. And so I hadn't seen it till this rewatch.
Which is fair. But just like Elf, this one sort of became an instant classic. And I would argue that it's also in that holiday movie Hall of Fame along with Love Actually. Justice for Love Actually. I feel like I just learned that there are some people who don't like Love Actually, and that like blew my mind. But next year, The Holiday will be celebrating its 20th anniversary, which is very upsetting to me. I can't believe it. But let's talk about it. So like you said, Mary, this is a rom-com. It was written, produced, and directed by Queen Nancy Meyers. So you already know you're going to get incredible interiors, really fun, witty banter, and just sweet characters. Nothing gets too stressful in Nancy Meyers movies, and that's why they always feel like a warm hug. This movie was a huge hit and a critical success. According to New York Times, Love Actually, Bridget Jones's Diary, and You've Got Mail walked so that The Holiday could run. I mean, those are the Hall of Famers of rom-coms, I would argue. So this movie undoubtedly pulled on the DNA from these movies, and Nancy Meyers really wanted to tell this story of Christmas time love, but there's also, with her, we always get these iconic, envy-inducing interiors, incredible homes. We have a huge estate in LA that is owned by Cameron Diaz, and this adorable cottage on the English countryside owned by Kate Winslet. So we have these two powerhouse co-stars, which is incredible, but both of them are really heartsick and they're desperate for a fresh perspective around the holiday season. So both of them have been betrayed by their longtime loves, and they decide they need a change of scenery around the holiday season, and they go on this house swap website. And Amanda literally just goes on the internet and Googles vacation spots. Like, what? And it's worth noting that Airbnb did not exist at this time.
I was dying over that, like the whole Googling scene and like the word she was using and what she found with the word she was using. That was amazing.
Now we are all Boolean experts. We know SEO, optimization, like that would never really fly today. And while there's no evidence that Airbnb was inspired by The Holiday, it was founded 2 years later. So you decide. I feel like there's got to be some untapped market. Someone watched that movie and they're like, wow, there's an untapped market here. We should work on this. But let's talk about this iconic stacked cast. We have Kate Winslet and Cameron Diaz, who star as Iris and Amanda. They are just so upset. They arrange a home exchange to escape this heartbreak during the holiday season. And they meet Jude Law and Jack Black as our leading men. They play Graham and Miles. And we also have some really great supporting roles. We have Eli Wallach, Edward Burns, and Rufus Sewell.
I also read in my research that Kate and Rufus had actually dated in the early 90s. She said in an interview that the reunion was friendly, but there might be a little awkwardness filming those scenes together. I don't know. You gotta wonder.
I love Kate Winslet. She's definitely my favorite actress of all time. She was also a favorite of Nancy Meyers, who handpicked Kate Winslet to play this role. She wrote all of Iris's lines with Kate Winslet in mind. And fun fact, the character Iris was named after Jude Law's daughter. So Nancy had this all in her mind already. She was really manifesting the cast she wanted for this movie. And man, did she deliver. So I would think that an actress like Kate, who's in Titanic and all of these serious Oscar-nominated films, would immediately be excited by doing a rom-com. To me, it seems like, at least if you're thinking about serious cinema, rom-coms are often viewed as not as technically difficult as big dramas or action movies. But think again. Even though Kate Winslet was a huge fan of Nancy Meyers' previous work, she saw Something's Gotta Give. So good. From 2003. Kate was really only known for her roles in period dramas. But she loved the idea of playing this more contemporary woman from the English countryside in this rom-com. It was a genre that was completely new to her, but she was nervous and scared about trying to be funny. And I just thought that was so sweet and fun, because I feel like people kind of turn their nose up at rom-coms. And I love that this serious actress who has been nominated for an Oscar was like, that is so hard to do. So justice for rom-coms. She also said that it was Jude Law who helped her settle a bunch of those nerves. She said, quote, Jude and I would speak on the telephone a lot before we started shooting. Oh my God, they're going to fire us. They're going to recast. What if we don't make them laugh? And can you imagine those two on the phone being nervous to film this movie? It's so sweet. In preparing for this role, Kate watched a bunch of different comedies, just like you said, Mary, for Elf. You got to get in the headspace, right? And she would watch a bunch of comedies from the 1940s, including His Girl Friday, The Philadelphia Story, just to get a better sense of comedic timing. Now, we mentioned Jude earlier. We have to talk about his character, Graham. Fun fact, Robert Downey Jr. auditioned for this role. I can't imagine literally anybody else playing this role. It had to be Jude Law or nobody. And similar to Kate Winslet, Jude had been appearing in period dramas and science fiction movies in the early to mid 2000s. So he was worried about playing a more contemporary role, and again, in this more comical setting. It didn't require an accent. He didn't have to move. He didn't have to wear a crazy costume. And Nancy Meyers was also a little hesitant if Jude Law was going to fit into this genre, because all we had known of him were these more serious movies. And his character, it could be argued, has more of an arc than the others. He goes from this sort of playboy to very vulnerable, widower father. But she decided to cast him after a meeting with Jude where they sat down and they went through the script together. To help him prepare for this role, Nancy sent him a collection of Clark Gable movies to show him, this is the kind of performance that I want you to give in the holiday.
Ugh, I loved reading about his iconic Mr. Napkin Head scene. So cute when he's with Cameron and she's meeting his girls and he puts a napkin over his face with his glasses. Apparently that was pretty much improvised. He came up with the smoking line on the spot. And when the actress who played his daughter, Sophie, by the way, she beat out 2,500 girls to get that part. She told Cameron, "It's so funny, you'll fall out of your chair." Apparently that was also improvised and a genuine reaction, not in the script. I love little stories like that.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed with the two little girls in the movie. Berry Kiss. They're so cute and so sweet. So let's talk about Jack Black's character. I was kind of surprised to see him in this movie. I'm not going to lie. He plays Miles, and he is this Hollywood film composer. He works with Cameron Diaz's character, who owns a movie trailer company. again, her name is Amanda. So Miles works with Amanda, and he also works with Amanda's ex-boyfriend, Ethan. Fun fact, Jimmy Fallon auditioned for the role of Miles. Do we see that?
I think he could be.
He could be, but I don't know. But as with Cameron and Kate, Nancy Meyers, she specially created this character for Jack Black after she saw School of Rock in 2003. So how funny is that? She literally manifested this entire cast. Her only hesitation, it seemed like, was on Jude Law, even though she still wrote the characters' names as if he was going to be playing. Whichever Etsy witch Nancy Meyers is using, I need her name and number immediately. So Nancy said that when she was thinking about this movie, she thought that Jack Black was someone that she would like to write a part for. And she said, I'm aware he's not Clark Gable. He's not tall, dark, and handsome, but he's adorable. He's lovable. It's my way of saying this is the right kind of guy. This is what most guys look like if they're lucky. He's so adorable. And why not? End quote. So I kind of love that. She clearly has a thing for Clark Gable.
Clearly.
She's right. Why can't we think outside the mold a little bit? I wish we could do the same for women. You know, not everyone looks like Cameron Diaz or Kate Winslet, but we're getting there. So because he was cast against this stereotypical what a leading man looks like in a rom-com, I guess Jack Black also felt a little nervous. And he eventually agreed to sign on, but he was hesitant at first. And it took learning that Kate Winslet was signed on for him to officially agree to play Graham. And he said it was kind of difficult to find the, quote, adorable side in his role, but he loved Miles's relationship with music. And when I think of Jack Black, I think of him going, like that's just who he is. I feel like this was kind of an extension of his character in School of Rock. And he said that he could relate to Miles as a film composer. You know, he felt like he knew more about that world, so he could at least bring that element to the movie.
I read that Nancy literally had to woo him over at a pasta dinner because, again, he had that similar hesitation about doing a rom-com. And obviously we know that it took him learning he was going to be acting alongside Kate Winslet. But let me just say, you could get me to do a lot over a pasta dinner as well. So I hear it. I get it.
We can be bribed, in fact. It's just so funny to me that all of these actors were like afraid to do a rom-com. And I think that just goes to show that for a rom-com to be really good, it takes a special skill. And everyone needs to stop turning their noses up at rom-coms. Justice for the rom-com. Let's talk about Arthur Abbott. This is my favorite character of the entire movie, played by Eli Wallach. So Arthur Abbott plays Amanda's neighbor. He is a famous screenwriter from like that golden age of Hollywood. And Iris, when she stays at Amanda's house during this house swap, befriends Arthur. And she takes his mail in for him, and he is nominated for this very special award. They set a goal together that he's going to walk up on stage without any assistance from a walker or a cane. And it is just like the cutest friendship ever. And this actor, Eli, he was 90 years old when The Holiday was filmed, which is bananas. I never would have guessed that he's 90 years old. And Nancy found him so energetic and so animated on set that she would have to remind him to slow down. She's like, hello, you're supposed to play someone who can't walk very well, is a little unstable on his feet. Like, act your age a little bit. Act more like an older man. And I just love that. And it just goes to show age is but a number.
It's so interesting because I grew up watching old movies with my dad, and Eli actually plays the really bad, scary guy in the original Magnificent Seven with Yul Brynner. And I think this was honestly the first time I had seen him in a movie since that movie. And it was just really, let me tell you, really cool to see him in a different role.
He was so convincing in this role. Part of me assumed that he was playing himself.
I wondered if there was an element of
right?
That. Yes.
I'm like, this guy definitely is from this era and like loves watching these old movies. But the Iris Arthur friendship is like such a sweet, warm hug in this movie. And it was a nice little break from just being so centered on romantic relationships. It was a cute little detour. There's also some really fun appearances by some other familiar faces. We get a Catherine Hahn cameo. John Krasinski is also in the movie. There's another notable cameo that happens inside a Blockbuster store, R.I.P. I will never get over the end of Blockbuster. Dustin Hoffman is inside the Blockbuster when Jack Black is there. and he is talking to Iris about the score from The Graduate. And Justin kind of looks over and he raises his eyebrows. And it's just this kind of like blink and you'll miss it moment. But according to Dustin, this whole cameo was totally unscripted. He was just going to Blockbuster to rent a movie when he saw the lighting from the production crew and he walked over to be like, hey guys, what's happening here? And obviously he knows Nancy Meyers because who doesn't? And she was like, we got to write you in to this short scene. And that's how it happened.
Oh my God. So like a perchance moment becoming a little mini scripted moment with Hollywood royalty. That is crazy. I loved reading this about another little unscripted moment. That boob graze line that Jack Black says when they're in line, maybe at the sushi bar, that was inspired from a real moment. Apparently, Jack Black accidentally bumped into Nancy Meyers on set and immediately apologized for, quote, the boob graze. And Nancy thought this was so funny that she literally wrote it into the next scene. I love that she's kind of like a work in progress with her work. She's adding things. She's taking inspiration from things that are just happening that day and putting them into the script. That's really cool.
And I feel like it keeps it really fresh because I don't know how long movies take to get made, but knowing Elf took literally 10 years to get off the ground, it keeps it from feeling too stale or too dated to work in some of those more modern references. I just freaking love it. There's some other incredible cameos that we have to talk about because Amanda, as we mentioned, she owns this movie trailer cutting company. So Lindsay Lohan appears in one of the movies that Amanda is working on creating a trailer for. Lindsay, we know, appeared in Nancy Meyers' remake of The Parent Trap in 1998. And she appears in this trailer alongside James Franco, who is also a friend of Nancy Meyers. And these are totally uncredited appearances. They just appear in this quick little trailer of this fake film called Deception. And it's just so fun. It makes it feel so real to have those two very noteworthy, very recognizable actors. God, I loved it. And I'm like, wow, can they really make Deception a movie? Because I would have loved to see it back then. I would love to see Lindsay Lohan in an action movie. Let's talk about the filming. So the UK part of the film is something that a lot of people fantasize about. This time of year, everybody wants to be inside Iris's cottage in the English countryside. And this was shot in a small village in the county of Surrey in southeast England. This little town dates back to the 11th century. Very picturesque, so adorable. And I think everyone is like, where do I go to stay in this house? Where do I go to even just see this house? Because so many of us have associated it with Christmas for so long. Well, I hate to break it to you, it doesn't really exist in real life. So the production team did source a genuine cottage that they thought could work for the filming, but it was a considerable distance from London and it just really wasn't going to work with the crew schedule. So they decided to construct one for filming. So the house exists only in our memory now. And yes, that is a Titanic reference. Let's talk about how successful this movie was. It grossed $205.8 million worldwide against a budget of $85 million. It did receive mixed critical reviews upon its release. Obviously, it got so much praise for the visuals because, again, it's Nancy Meyers. The girl can design literally anything. And the cast performances obviously were a huge highlight, but there was some criticism around its predictable plot. But again, I say poo-poo. It's okay that some things are a little predictable in this life when everything else is not. Okay. A lot of the criticisms mostly came for Kate Winslet's character and Jack Black's character because they just argue that Jack Black is like not in the movie enough. And one critic even said that Jack Black didn't even need to be in the movie because Iris's real love story is her friendship with Arthur. And I kind of love that. I don't know if I agree with it, but I do feel like she found love in a different way, friendship love. And they just argued that Kate's character really came to life more in her scenes with Arthur than with Jack Black. I don't know. Regardless, this was the 12th highest grossing film of the 2000s to be helmed by a female director. Exciting. And, you know, who knows? Maybe it did inspire the launch of Airbnb, which completely revolutionized the way we travel.
I want to talk about how Nancy views this film. And she said in a recent podcast that she actually never really looked at this as a holiday movie and was truly shocked at how much Christmas was in it when she rewatched. She just set it at Christmas because that can be a lonely time for people if you're alone at the holidays. I also read somewhere that the movie made house swapping so popular that police in England actually had to issue warnings about identity fraud and murder risks from swapping homes with strangers. I feel like that's a little glazed over in the movie.
Right, because this is before there was
Yes.
like an official, like huge Airbnb thing standardizing it. But I remember thinking like, wow, that would be so cool. I would love to see the inside of someone else's house and like move to Hawaii for a month. And now it's possible with Airbnb and all of their competitors. Let's talk about the music, because as soon as I hear the ding, 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 that theme song, I'm instantly transported back to Surrey, England. And this contains music by various artists, most notably Hans Zimmer, who has won 2 Academy Awards, 1 for Lion King. He's also won 3 Golden Globes, 5 Grammys, and he's been nominated for 7 Emmy Awards. What? But then we also get Imogen Heap and Let Go by Frou Frou. I also believe that was made popular in the OC at one point, or perhaps Grey's Anatomy. It just felt like such a unique choice for this Christmas time movie, but maybe that goes back to what you were just saying, Mary, where like it's not meant to be a Christmas movie, it's just a movie that happens at Christmas time. We obviously have to mention that we get that incredible Mr. Brightside rendition by Cameron Diaz as well. I can't hear that song at a wedding without thinking choking on your alibi. Just so iconic.
That's so funny. That scene really took me. I just did not expect that song or that moment at all. And it was awesome. Going into this kind of apprehensive as someone who's uncertain about some rom-coms. This is truly a Nancy Meyers piece of art. I have to say, Jude Law is like so hot in this. This is like prime Jude Law. My stomach was literally doing flip-flops seeing him in this role. He's sensitive. He cries. He's a doting father. He tells, Cameron Diaz that he loves her first. He is not afraid to speak his mind and tell a woman how he feels about her. I just was obsessed. And my final thought was just, it really was interesting for me to see Jack Black in this type of role. I don't think he's ever done anything like this since. But I do think they kept a dose of his like trademark silliness in there while still keeping it rom-com appropriate.
It's a classic for a reason, I would argue. It's a cute one. I wish that I could go back and watch it for the first time. I would love that experience. Okay, we have one more movie to get through, and we'll go through this one quickly because I feel like everyone has seen this. But for some reason, I'm seeing Muppet's Christmas Carol literally everywhere right now, so we have to talk about it. And what is so fun about this is that the Muppets are cast as the Christmas Carol characters. So it's not Miss Piggy as herself or Kermit as himself. So it's kind of fun and meta in that way. It's like you're watching the Muppets put on a little play. And to me, this movie is so special because, one, it makes this Christmas classic story relatable to younger kids. And it's pretty true to the original Christmas Carol book. And I just love how the humans and the Muppets coexist so seamlessly. It has this magical feeling to it. And if that's not what Christmas is about, I don't know what is. I also feel like Elf probably took a lot of tricks from A Muppet Christmas Carol because, like you mentioned, Mary, they do a lot of those same camera tricks with the proportions and playing with large and small and different movie sets. So I just thought the behind the scenes of this was so fascinating. They did use some CGI and we can talk about that. But for the most part, it's all the practical puppeteering. This movie was not a huge hit when it first came out, but it has since become a cult classic. It was really a modest box office success. It grossed just a little over $27 million on a budget of $12 million. And this just shocked me because it is such a beloved favorite today. And it did receive generally favorable reviews, but its reputation has grown so much in the years since its release that it's often listed as one of the best Christmas films of all time. And it has a really interesting backstory. So let's talk about it. This movie was directed by Brian Henson, and his father is Jim Henson, who literally created the Muppets, and he voiced several of them. He's the original Kermit the Frog. And Jim just completely revolutionized the way puppetry is captured and presented on film. Sadly, Jim passed away very suddenly and unexpectedly in 1990 after a bout with the flu. Jim had already done 3 Muppet movies, and his son, Brian Henson, didn't want to have too much of a direct comparison between him and his dad. So he thought, let's do something completely different. And his agent, Bill Haber, approached Brian, again, this is Jim's son, and he said, Christmas Carol is the greatest story of all time. You should absolutely do that. And while Brian was thinking it over and he's sort of still reeling over the death of his father, while he's thinking about it, his agent Bill called him back and said, I already sold it to ABC TV channel. So poor Brian didn't really have a ton of time to think it over. He was kind of committed to doing it. Brian was also only 28 at the time, and he was reportedly just really nervous and terrified. Well, why was he so nervous? After the script was submitted to approval for ABC, the executives at Walt Disney offered to purchase the script for a feature film instead of a television release, which is what he was originally thinking. This is the first Muppets film to be produced by Disney. And as we know, Disney would later acquire the rights to the Muppets characters and all of the assets in 2004. But Brian did an incredible job with this. Michael Caine said that he got halfway through the film before he found out that it was Brian's first time directing. And I think that is such a testament to what an incredible talent he must be. So let's talk about Michael Caine. He plays our key character, Scrooge. Michael Caine, who us millennials know as the beauty pageant coach from Miss Congeniality. That's how I think of him, even though he is like a very serious Academy Award-winning actor. So Michael Caine reportedly said, I'm going to play this movie like I'm working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I will never wink. I will never do anything Muppety. I am going to play Scrooge as if it is an utterly dramatic role and there are no puppets around me. And he said he took inspiration for the role from, quote, Wall Street cheats and embezzlers. I thought they represented a very good picture of meanness and greed, end quote. Damn, well, Michael slayed this role. I also want to talk about Steve Whitmire. He does Kermit and Rizzo. And this was very nerve-wracking for Steve. This whole cast and crew are still grieving over the loss of Jim. No one was expecting this to happen, and they're trying to make this movie while many of them are coming into new roles that Jim had originated and perfected for decades before. So Steve was taking over for Jim as Kermit. I can't imagine having to come in as the new Kermit voice. Do you know how much pressure that is? The Muppets started in like the 60s. So for 30 years, we heard the same Kermit voice. Steve said it was really important not only to match Kermit's voice, but also his character. He said Jim and him don't sound exactly alike. And the night before they pre-recorded the songs, he said he had so much trouble getting to sleep, just thinking, I really want this to be good. I just don't want to let anybody down. And he also performed, in addition to Kermit, Rizzo the Rat, which was a role that Steve had originated and had been doing for almost 12 years by that point. And that's all like goofing around. If you've seen the movie, you know, Rizzo's kind of like the comedic relief in the movie. And he said when the director said cut, the characters would stay alive for a while at the end of the scene and they continue to talk. Like, how was that? Did we do a good job? And like they would say sometimes like crass things. And apparently a lot of scenes came out of that improvisation. And I would love to go behind the scenes of a Muppets movie one day. I bet it is just like so magical. So let's talk about the movie. It premiered in December of 1992. It was the fourth movie in the Muppets universe, but this was the first Muppet film where a human is the main protagonist. Brian Henson, the director, said that Gonzo was chosen as the narrator Charles Dickens because he was also the least likely choice. Gonzo is the blue one with like that long nose. And Rizzo the Rat is kind of his sidekick throughout the storytelling to inject some of that humor and also kind of be that Greek chorus character. And according to Brian, 95% of what Gonzo says in the movie is directly taken from the Christmas Carol book. So we're really learning something here. Brian Henson, the director, said that when Scrooge comes home and he's like this angry, lonely man, and the first of the ghosts show up, they're Muppet ghosts, he said he knew that it was going to scare people. And apparently there were kids crying in the movie theater. But then when Jacob Marley and his brother Bob come out, they're singing this really fun tune. And that's when it kind of reels everyone back in and it feels really fun. So we're going from much darker themes in this movie than we typically see in a Muppets film, but then going to these high highs, which makes for a really nice balance. I just am fascinated by the production logistics of filming a movie with puppets and humans. So I wanted to share some of the behind the scenes facts that I learned. During filming, to allow for the Muppets and the human actors to be in the same shot, they had to have the floors removed and reinserted. And Michael Caine is basically walking across this narrow plank in between the Muppets and their performers. So if you can think about it this way, there are performers like underneath where Michael Caine is walking, so their arms can stick above their shoulders with the puppets on them. And the buildings in the London street scenes were constructed by hand and diminished in size to achieve that appearance of the streets being longer. So there's a documentary about the making of this movie, and it shows even interviews with the Muppets characters, which is very funny. Miss Piggy appears and she says, "They gave me this teeny tiny role. Obviously, they're afraid of my talent." I mean, what a queen. I love Miss Piggy. She's probably my favorite. But again, just adorable how they make this whole universe come to life, even in a documentary about the movie. So we learn that there's 280 Muppets that appear in this movie. And the puppeteers, again, are working on this raised stage. So it looks like the Muppets are walking on the road, but the road comes up to the shoulder of the puppeteers. And to make it even more amazing, the puppeteers are watching TV monitors showing them how their movements are looking on camera so they can make sure that everything is perfect. So in addition to speaking and moving their hands to match with the words, and making facial expressions for their puppets and hanging their arms like above their head, they're watching a monitor to make sure that they're able to adjust accordingly. Just the coordination is just so incredible. Well, of course, we have to talk about the ghosts in this movie. There's the ghost of Christmas Present, and he is animatronic, and he's larger than life. And there's a full-sized man inside this suit. But the facial expressions of Christmas Present and his voice were being controlled by a separate actor. So it's basically two people bringing this one character to life. Insane. And to show that the Muppets and Scrooge are flying through the night sky, they used green screen technology. And the Muppeteers are covered in these green outfits. And you get to see it all in the documentary. It's very cool. A lot of people make fun of the CGI that was used. There's one ghost, I think it was the ghost of Christmas Past. She's like this little girl who's very creepy, and you're like, why does it look like that? I'm going to have nightmares about her. But aside from that, it holds up well. Michael Caine just did such an incredible job. I love how seriously he took it. And it's a classic for a reason.
These were awesome. I've already rewatched these, but I feel like we still have 3 weeks to Christmas, and I probably should go and watch them all again in preparation.
Do you guys watch movies on Christmas Day? Is that anything that you guys do in your family?
Usually we watch A Christmas Story on Christmas because it's my mom's favorite. So we just watch that one.
That's what we do too. And there's usually, or there used to be, the marathon on TBS for 24 hours. And we would just keep that on all day. Love it.
We watch some of these favorites though in the interim. Let us know in the DMs what your favorite Christmas movies are. We also have at least one episode, maybe 2 episodes that we'll link in the show notes where we talk about other Christmas favorites as well.
Thanks so much for listening. Make sure that you are following us at When They Popped Pod on Instagram and TikTok. Throw us a DM and make sure that you're also subscribed to our Patreon, which also makes an incredible holiday gift for the pod Y2K lovers in your life. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye.
Bye.